welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Flecha, and joining me as always is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, bud?
Feeling kind of paranoid, Pete.
You're always paranoid. What is it today?
I read about all these security things, all this stuff going on. I thought I heard my NAS beep, and I don't know why. I feel like I'm just losing control. It's probably was just my dog squeaking, but I think the Wi-Fi is talking to me. I need to figure out what's going on.
All right. Well, don't talk back to the Wi-Fi just yet, because we've got a great podcast to talk about. As you know, we're still in this series discovering all the various advanced services for VCF. We are not alone today. We're going to be talking about security. Hopefully, we can figure out what's going on with John's NAS, but definitely we're going to learn about vDefend. And so, joining the conversation first as part of the Virtually Speaking podcast team, Jad El-Zein, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
And joining us as our subject matter expert today, and for the first time on Virtually Speaking, hopefully not the last, is Chris McCain. Chris, welcome back. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Man, I got to start by saying your background, completely black. I asked you about it before we started recording, and I learned that you've got a light board there.
I do. It's one of these tools that wows customers when you do these Zoom meetings. And, I've had this since COVID. Interestingly enough, during COVID, I stopped making PowerPoints altogether because everything just became this dynamic capability with customers. And then when COVID happened and we started going back out on the road, I thought to myself, man, I really don't want to start building PowerPoints anymore. So I've become avoidant of PowerPoints as much as humanly possible in favor of just shooting from the hip wherever I can.
Yeah, well, we need to use that on this episode for sure. So we've got some questions, but why don't we start super high level? We'll talk about a little bit about what the problem statements are, get into sort of what vDefend is, and then we'll dive deeper and get more specific. But at the very high level, when I think security, I think back in the days when John was a young administrator of firewalls, Cisco ASAs, and that was all he had to do, was just make sure those Ciscos were covered in his little small business. But I think the world has evolved since then, in terms of perimeter security being really all you need. This is many, many moons ago. So how has the world changed from a security perspective, from your perspective?
Well, I think it's changed significantly. You look at the evolution of security technologies, and unfortunately, the evolution of security technologies is not moving as fast as the evolution of the malicious threat actor. So as fast as they are figuring out how to do bad things, we are trying to figure out how to stop them from being able to do that. But I think more importantly, what's been left behind is the mindset that people apply to security. So the technology is changing, the threat attack chain is changing, but people are still thinking about it from an old school model. And that's where companies get in trouble, because they're not shifting the way they think about security to match the way that attackers are doing things today.
Is this one of those things that are like the healthcare and food production industries, where food is produced that's so bad for you to help balance healthcare's revenue streams and vice versa? Or is this just something that's happening because of the natural progression of technology?
Look, I think the root of all this is money. That's what it is, right? So you could say food is made to make money and healthcare is to make money. Attacking is about money. Threat actors want to get paid as quickly as possible. And when they can find infrastructures that allow them to follow their hacking 101 handbook, they love it. If they can't follow the 101 handbook, guess what they're going to do? Go find another organization. So the beauty of where we're at today is the fact that if we change the way we think about security, if we think about what an attacker wants to do and we target those actions, we don't necessarily have to protect everything. We have to put enough security measure in place so that the attacker feels like, I'm spending time that I don't want to spend in this organization. I'm going to go find another one.
I don't annoy them enough with, because when you look at these breakdowns of these attacks, I feel like it's always like an 8 or 12 step process of like, we got in here, then we moved here, and then we found this thing, did this thing, and any way you can kind of, start blasting welcome to the jungle, and they find really weird stuff, or they find weird roadblocks in that process. Like, you know what, this isn't the house I'm robbing today. I'm going to go find somebody else.
The reality is most of the attacks that happen, they follow the same attack chain. They're using the same sets of protocols again and again to do things. Now, the malware might be different. The code that they install might be different, but the mechanisms they use, like you pointed out, going from here to here to here to there,
the lateral movement.
In security terms, we call that lateral movement. So the lateral movement, it tends to be the same. So even if you steal credentials from something and you have the keys to the kingdom, the chances of you using social engineering or phishing to land exactly onto an asset that has anything of value is small. You have to be able to move. Now, most attacks, realistically, there's only 3 to 4 moves they have to make. Attackers are very precise. They're very surgical in the way that they do things. This is not just, I'm going to go out and spam anything and everything I possibly
the entire
can.
network for every port. Like that'll set off.
They'll be very patient to find exactly what they need when they know that they can move the way that they want to move.
So let me trigger some nostalgia here. So honeypotting, microsegmentation, the hard shell and GUI inside, all of these things were like our talk tracks back in the day. I'd be up, having these deep security conversations with our Fed customers, for example, DoD, intelligence, and so on. And the biggest problem was like getting or capturing or at least knowing that an attacker is there and then being able to watch and learn, right? That's what the honeypotting is. Get them in there, trap them, use VMware technologies to replicate that environment. Meanwhile, your production spins up somewhere else. Super cool, right?
Yeah.
How have we evolved since then? And what have we done to kind of keep up with all of this?
Before the podcast, we were talking about the old school NSBU days, right? So I joined 13 years ago, right after Nicira had been acquired. Just to give a little anecdotal history here, but when I joined, my initial role was really to help build the business of NSBU, the education content, the certifications, what's the go-to-market strategy, how do we do all of these things from a networking and security perspective? Because if you looked at VMware, up until that point in time, every product that they had, with the exception of that Zimbra mail thing that they tried, everything was an offshoot.
I will not allow slide rocket erasure.
That was horrible.
Everything was kind of an offshoot of the hypervisor. You have your standard hypervisor. We had VDI, right? But VDI is an offshoot. It's virtual machines, blah, blah, blah. So with networking and security, it was a completely different audience and demographic that you had to go hit with these things. Now, when I joined, I would say 95% of the people in the BU had come from another networking vendor. So everybody was gung-ho, super excited about networking. Oh my God, look what we can do. We're abstracting routing, we're abstracting switching, and you could do this in the hypervisor, and you can build networks, and you can destroy them, and you can back them up, and you can restore them. All the same things you do with virtual machines. And then customers are like, that's not that great. I don't really need to build that many networks. So what? But what's this security thing that you have, right? So then we were like, oh, wait a minute. They are really interested in the security thing. So Jad, this is where we jumped 2 feet in with microsegmentation. And we stood on every mountaintop and we screamed microsegmentation. We went to every customer. We did every Explore session. It was microseg. In fact, Explore years ago, if you went 8 years ago, 6 years ago, you go to Explore, if you turned microseg into a drinking game, you'd have been wasted by 9 a.m. because that's just all we wanted to do was microseg. Well, The problem with microseg is that customers sat there and they went, yeah, like they almost gave themselves whiplash on how hard they nodded. And then we left the room and they were like, no, I'm not doing this. We went back in with like, why? What happened? You seem so excited about microseg. And the customer goes, well, we don't even know how applications communicate. We don't have visibility. We don't know. I don't know what's supposed to talk to what. How am I supposed to build policy? So if you remember back in the VMware days, if a customer told us they had a problem, what did we do? We built a product for it. So we did. We built a product that went in and it analyzed everything and said, okay, you told us you didn't know about what it was. We're going to show you what it was. And then you can build your policies. And again, customers are like, yeah, this is great. And then we leave and they no, we're not doing this. And we go back there and we say, what's wrong? You told us you didn't know. Now we're telling you. And they say, well, we don't have anybody that wants to push the button. We don't have anybody that wants to be accountable for those rules because they don't know if they're right. So, so now we fast forward to today to answer your question, right? What's changed? What's changed is that not only has the BU changed the way we think about security, but we've changed the way we think about consuming security to match the way that we can allow customers to get the most value out of what it is that they do. So I'll give you an example here. I'm going to use the light board.
Here we go.
You're fulfilling every stereotype I have of networking people, that you're never more than 18, feet from a whiteboard or a marker.
All right. So check this out. Let's say we put time and effort here on this axis, and we put security on this axis. So, every organization has this level of security they hit that says, okay, I feel like we're protected. It may not be everything, but I'm sleeping at night because we have stuff in place. If you take the traditional security model of, I'm going to use firewalls and I'm going to put an EDR agent in here and I'm going to use this NDR device at the end of row and all this kind of stuff, what you're doing is you're adding this incremental security. So over time, it gets better little by little as you do this. And at some point, you'll hit that point where, okay, we're protected. The problem is in the traditional mechanism, this takes so long. It seems like a very daunting task. And by the way,
you're also doing one project at a time to absorb that.
Exactly. And that's where microsegmentation is an issue. So I actually had a customer one time that the account rep got me on the phone, said, hey, the customer's having problems with doing their microseg with vDefend or NSX at the time. And I get on the phone and the customer says, hey, this just isn't working. So what's not working? He says, well, we've got 4,000 applications and we're getting them done at about 1 per week. And I said, okay, so what's not working? He goes, well, that's going to take 4,000 weeks. And I said, I know, but what's not working? He goes, well, it's just going to take too long. It's not that it wasn't working. It's just that they were looking at it thinking, oh my God, this is going to take 4,000 weeks by the time we protect what we want to protect. So the return on their effort, they couldn't see it because it took so long. So what we're doing now with the product is we're making it so that customers consume it to flip the way this is graphed. Let's go this way. So we can get the most bang for our buck in the early times. And then everything after that is a diminishing return on the amount of effort we put in, because we've built a strong security posture from the jump, and then we add incremental value over time. But at least we can get to a point where we feel comfortable with our security sooner rather than later. So that mindset has to change, but we also are now building it into the product so that customers can consume it in a way that shortens that time to value with respect to security and effort.
So what are we doing to shorten that adoption curve?
Okay, so you mentioned lateral movement, and that's exactly where it begins. There was a recent attack called Brickstorm. I don't know how familiar you guys are with it, but Brickstorm was an attack against vCenter. It was not a vulnerability in vCenter. Let's be clear on that. Not a vulnerability. It's not a CVE. There's not a patch. There's nothing. There's no update. But it's a vulnerability where they take advantage of lateral movement to get to vCenter. Now, why? Because vCenter is a high-value target. Look, we're all bought in on private cloud. We want every customer to buy in on private cloud. When customers do that, you got to realize that vCenter becomes a high-value target. And so that's exactly what Brickstorm did. But the way that Brickstorm moved through the environment to get to vCenter, that's what we start protecting. So I'll ask you guys, does anybody know what the number one protocol is to move laterally if an attacker gets into your environment?
3389 RDP.
Yeah, it's RDP.
It's RDP.
Always.
It's always RDP, right? It's the ransomware distribution protocol.
Because that's also how I would get to servers that were in other networks sometimes. I'll just keep.
I used to manage servers like that all the time. What a vulnerability!
I was that guy who was chained 4 RDP sessions deep sometimes. So
exactly, and so why wouldn't attackers do that? We leave it open. We think, we have to be able to manage. We leave it open. So if you think about that, if you focus your security efforts on RDP, SMB, DNS, and Active Directory, if you focus on those 4 things, you will buy down significant risk in the enterprise.
If ADP's if domain controllers are compromised, you're done. So yeah.
Exactly, right? So stop thinking about your app. Stop thinking about, I cringe when I say this, the crown jewels of your environment. Start thinking about the things that are extremely predictable in the infrastructure that you can protect, and you can do so quickly. And when you look at the private cloud, right? If a customer buys this full stack private cloud, to me personally, the fastest way that you're going to get value out of the private cloud is from security. Because I think vSAN is phenomenal. But every customer who buys VCF 9 today and wants to deploy it has an existing storage infrastructure. And they're not going to migrate to vSAN just because they can. They're going to migrate to vSAN in 12 to 18 months when it's time to refresh the storage and they realize, shit, we already own vSAN. Why are we going to buy new storage? And then there's value. And the same thing with the networking side of NSX. Every customer has an existing physical network. Nobody's going to do overlay networking just because they can. There's got to be a business case. So 12 months from now, when they say, hey, look, I think it's time we redo our DR strategy, and we want to stretch L2 across geographic distances, great. You own NSX, you're done. You can do that. But that might be down the road. But when you stand up VCF 9 today, what you don't have is a security product that does what we do. There's no competitor to this in the way we do it, as efficiently and as securely as we do it. And so there's immediate value on day one that you can get.
Your alternative is assigning one firewall per VM or something obscene,
or hairpinning to other infrastructure, and just missing the whole point of all of this, right?
Well, so look, you got three options, right? I could do physical firewalls where now I have to add the complexity of rerouting traffic to make sure it traverses the layer 3 device.
Every VM is on a /30.
Well, funny you say that. I'll tell you a story about that in a second. The other option is to put an agent in the OS. And now how do I manage and scale these agents across thousands and thousands of workloads? I don't want to do that.
The management plan of those agents is now its own giant security risk.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. But I did have a customer that I met with one time, and the guy started the whole conversation. He said, we got rid of all layer 2. And I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more. And he says, well, we've got this big containers deployment, and everything we deploy is ephemeral. And so everything we gets its own IP and its own gateway. Everything. And I said, so you don't do you're serious, you don't do any layer? And he goes, no, everything is one IP and one gateway. We route everything. Wow. And I said, well, why did you do
I
this?
hate spanning tree, but I don't hate it that much.
Well, no, this is the funny part, right? Because I asked him, I said, well, why'd you do this? He said, well, we felt this was the easiest thing for us to do. And at the time, I texted the account rep and I said, I apologize for what I'm about to say. And I said, listen, I'm sorry. I got to call bullshit. There's no way this is the easiest thing you could do. This is the opposite of the easiest thing you could do. The easiest thing you could do is put them all on one big network and have a fewer number of networks than putting a larger number of smaller networks. And so I asked him, I said, when you force these over layer 3, are you doing any type of inspection from a security perspective? And he goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, okay, well, there's the reason. You did it because you wanted to be able to inspect all of your flows, and you didn't want to do something like PB lands because you wanted something more, right? Layer 4, at least inspection. And he goes, well, yeah, we wanted that too. I said, well, there's your reason, right? It wasn't because you thought this was the easiest thing. If you have that old school model in your brain about security, then you're thinking, okay, I have to hit a layer 3 device. But that's the beauty of vDefend, because it's built into the hypervisor. We don't care about network architecture. We could be on the same subnet, on the same host, and we can still enforce security, which is, you can't do that with any other tool. So it's a really unique opportunity. Now, the long-term impact of that, having a VCDX for a long time now and doing design, this is a tremendous opportunity for customers to rethink the way that they do networking. Because if you really want to be a private cloud that operates like the public cloud, you have to stop relying on the physical network fabric to do anything other than pass packets. That's it. You have to have an SLA that says, pass my packets. Don't do anything else. Design it once, wire it once, leave it alone, stop touching it. The entire consumption of networking should come through software like it does in AWS and GCP.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That was always my rebuttal when we would talk to customers and they're saying, well, we have very strict guidelines on how we do networking and security. And then in the same breath, they're telling me about the workloads in the public cloud. And I'm like, you just completely lost your whole argument, right?
It's
Yeah,
such
yeah.
a contradiction.
There is no
Right?
cue
And
factor
I-
that
and
you're
then I'm
running
like,
there. Yeah.
we're doing that by giving you
Yeah.
more control.
We have to have our network in this certain way. Well, how are you doing that in Amazon? We're not. Well, then why do you need it here? It doesn't make any sense.
Or they'll say, well, that's a different team. We don't have visibility into it. And you're just like, holy
Yeah.
moly, give me a...
Be more
Yeah.
like that team then.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
So-
you know, that mindset alone, that shift into, instead of focusing on apps, focus on the way attacks happen, has been tremendous for us because it resonates with customers. Because any customer that I've been to who has actually been attacked understands that it was RDP that was part of that process. So I get into I was with one customer, and as I mentioned this, the customer's sitting there shaking their head, and I said, "Oh, do you disagree?" And he goes, "No, but I wish I would have known this 6 months ago before we got attacked." Because it's just a very relevant conversation to have with security people.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, when people think about vDefend, you know, they think, oh, this is NSX distributed firewall, you know, with just a new label. Clearly, it's a lot more than that. So, this is me sort of setting you up here for this. But in a 2-minute conversation, how would you describe vDefend compared to, say, NSX distributed firewall?
Well, so look, there's been a tremendous uplift in vDefend. Now, you know, and the artist formerly known as NSX was networking and or security. And by the way, we didn't do a very good job of making sure customers understood that it was networking and or security, because a lot of customers thought that in order to do the security, you had to do overlay networking, when in fact, the two of those things were mutually exclusive. Could I have found more value using the two of them together? Sure. Did I have to use the two of them together? No, I did not. But now that they are split, where the networking is part of that core VCF platform and vDefend is its own entity, I would say this: vDefend, the single most powerful product to get value from immediately is still the distributed firewall, because of the architecture and because of the management plane that we built. You can easily implement this. So if I'm a virtualization engineer and I want to provide more value to my organization, the easiest way to do that is distributed firewall. Now, where does distributed firewall or vDefend with distributed firewall separate itself from what we have today? Well, now today we have a gateway firewall. We have agents that we can deploy into Linux operating systems that all then give you the same single management plane to control security across both virtualized and non-virtualized workloads. We throw into that security intelligence, IDS, IPS, network traffic analysis, network detection and response, and malware. So if I ever go into a customer who says to me VMware or Broadcom is not a security company, by the time I'm done, they realize how wrong they are, because our security portfolio is so robust that it's almost overwhelming for customers to say, you have all of that and I get all of that when I buy vDefend? And the answer is yes. Now, it's not an all or nothing proposition. It might be an overwhelming list, but you don't have to go from zero to everything on a Monday. You pick and choose the pieces that solve the business problem you want, and you consume it the way you want. So whether it's in the UI, whether it's via the API, whether it's VCFA, whether it's Terraform, whether you want to, write your own, whatever, it doesn't matter. You consume it how you want to, but it's a tool in your security tool belt that enforces policy like no other tool you could possibly have. So it's way more mature now than when we really just pushed it as the DFW alone.
It's a shame that you're not passionate about any of this. I'm not getting any energy or any indication that.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I know that, many moons ago, most environments were completely VM-centric environments. And as the world has progressed and many more people are getting into containers and Kubernetes, what does the security look like for both? Does it change? How do we handle the security from a vDefend perspective to VM environments compared to, say, containers?
So I wish there was something I could really get fired up about here, but I've got the most boring answer I could possibly have. It's still the same. And that's part of the beauty of this, is that when you buy into this private cloud idea and you're leveraging this platform, we are purpose building security tools for whatever workloads are running on top of this private cloud. Now, I've heard people at VMware say, oh, we do containers and we do VMs and we do AI workloads. And then I go, what is the difference? Well, I don't understand. Why is AI workload different from container and aren't the AI workloads just a container on there, right? So I know it's cool to say AI and everything, but from a security perspective, we see it as a workload. Whatever it is that's there, we want to be able to provide security for it. So having a single management plane to protect your virtual machines and your containers as an infrastructure guy is huge. Because I don't know that I want to rely on developers to have to do these things. And if I can do it at the hypervisor level and not rely on them to do it, that's great. Or if I want to build out the security, let's say tagging taxonomy, and then allow my developers to consume that tagging taxonomy in a way that provides security dynamically as they're using a YAML to deploy or using Terraform to deploy, and they're just consuming, that's a great way to be able to give them some tools to be able to do that.
You just totally killed my segue there, but still relevant. The term or phrase or trend du jour is platform engineering, right? And part of platform engineering is like the deliverable, the product of a platform engineering team is to deliver the internal developer platform, right? And VCF plays a huge role here. It is the substrate, and it provides a whole bunch of different services, but most importantly, allows like the rest of the ecosystem, open source, third party, whatever, to plug in. Now, to make an IDP successful, there's a self-serving or self-service component to it, right? So when does it make sense for security, for something that we consider to be the most critical part of being able to run your business, right, in tech or on tech? When does it make sense for that developer to be able to serve themselves the security? You know, when do we trust them? What can we do? Like, how does vDefend play in all that? And you did touch on it already, so it's expanding.
No, look, this is a great question, and I think there's an easy answer to this, but it can be very complex. The way I see it is this: I think there are a certain set of security, let's say security policies that should be laid out that are non-negotiable. Jad, you're the developer. You're going to deploy on top of my infrastructure. I'm going to have some policies that are there that you cannot do anything about these policies. And specifically, I'm talking about these, right? RDP, SMB. These are infrastructure level policies, non-negotiable. This is how our organization works. Now, we take a step above that, and maybe we start building out zones. So maybe there's a prod, a dev, and a DMZ. And now you're deploying the app. So I would give you the flexibility to decide, am I deploying to prod, dev, or DMZ? And based on where you land, you will now pick up another set of non-negotiable policies that you can't change. Now, within your app, that's where I may give you the freedom and flexibility. And here's where the road kind of diverges, because you'll get some developers who say, okay, here's what I need to be able to do. I need to be able to consume what you build and attach it to the way I'm creating something. Or you'll have developers that say, no, I want it to be more dynamic. I want to actually build it on the fly. Well, now we can do either one, because I can pre-stage all the different application architecture components. I could have a policy and a tag for web or DB or whatever it is you want to do with your app. And now you could just attach to that and pick up the policy. Or you could, through the API, say, oh, I'm going to dynamically create my tag in my group in my policy, and I'll give you that flexibility. So I love the idea of choice for the developer on what they want to do. But at the same time, I like being able to establish a set of infrastructure level policies that you cannot circumvent in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And by the
where
way,
there's, yeah.
I was going to say, this changes a little bit when we start to get into the VPC construct, right? I mean, it's similar concept where there's this logical construct and I own this stuff. That's fine. But underneath that VPC construct are the rules that I'm laying out that you are not going to be able to modify. So,
okay, so you can let them build a secure web connection to their, or a secure database connection as they're building out some little app. But I can still tell Pete, no, TFTP is always a stupid and insecure idea. You're not allowed to do that. Like, that's my baseline guardrail.
100%.
No jump boxes with RDP.
Exactly.
Jump boxes. Love
no RDP from anywhere to anywhere.
Pete. I know what you're thinking.
Backdoors.
No. Bad.
So opinionated infrastructure when it comes to security, but still giving some level of developer autonomy. I'm using all the this is buzzword bingo here.
Yeah, for sure.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So tags are obviously a very, very important one. Also, what I bring to the table. But then there's I'm going to give you some flexibility because I don't really know how you're going to deliver the business needs for whatever the use case is. And then we bring up this conversation of guardrails, right? So I'll give you the flexibility. You can then trigger your pipeline. Things are going to happen, but I need to watch it happen and be able to jump in when necessary, and I'll let you know about it. It'll be totally transparent.
Exactly.
So, this is something that is more important than a lot of people really understand. As they are looking into their environments and saying, okay, how do I deliver a platform versus a stack of products, right? I think it's an important one.
But I'll say this, because every time I hear this idea of platform, I think it's important for people to understand that when you want to build a platform, you have to leverage technologies that are embedded into the platform to make the platform better. And I think security is the key thing here. So I'll talk to customers who say, oh, we're a big Cisco shop. We want to do Cisco ACI, for example. And I think they get surprised when I say, well, that's great. You should use Cisco ACI. Well, why? Because Cisco ACI is a security tool that's built into the fabric of the routing and switching architecture. Well, it's not an either or conversation between Cisco ACI and VMware vDefend. If you're serious about security, you should absolutely be doing both, because one of them is protecting at the physical network level and the other one is protecting at the hypervisor level. And together, you are now saying I can use contracts and endpoint groups to be able to control access and flow into my hypervisor NICs, my management NICs, while at the same time leveraging another embedded security fabric to control the way things flow into my workloads. It actually doesn't get any better than that. So you want a platform, use the products in the platform that make things easier and better. Stop focusing on, I need this third-party add-on and this third-party tool and this additional security thing and that additional security thing. If it's in the product, it's not going to get beat from an efficiency standpoint or a management standpoint.
Okay. So I did have one question. We were talking about, all workloads are the same from a vDefend perspective, whether it's Kubernetes, whether it's even, like you said, AI being just a container. But what about things like GPUs that could be physical, like bare metal devices that are in AI? I know that's becoming more frequent, especially in a world of VCF where we're supporting GPUs and doing really cool things with GPUs. Is that a vulnerability, or is that something that needs to be looked at differently when it comes to securing?
Yeah, I think 100% it is. I started a project, I guess probably about a year ago. I reached out to a product manager in the Private AI Foundation. I said, hey, look, the way I see it, if Private AI Foundation starts to become a cornerstone for enterprises to do AI on-prem, then the next evolution of that is that attackers getting into the environment are going to see an on-prem AI as a high-value target. And I feel like there's two specific ways, maybe three specific ways that they would be able to take advantage of that. So let's say that I have a particular AI cluster, all right? And these are where my GPUs and all that kind of stuff are. So I'm running my learning models, all this kind of stuff. The source of truth, the data that I use to train my learning model, is critical. So if an attacker has the ability to poison that input, then they can ruin the output of the learning model. So from a vDefend perspective, from a network security perspective, I have to be able to ensure the validity of this source of truth. I can't let any source add data into my learning model. That would be bad. So I can use vDefend to do that, right? I could tag what I think are the valid sources or FQDNs or whatever it might be. And I could build a policy so that if the destination is whatever's inside my AI cluster and this sort of data tag, I'm going to allow that. So now I'm actually ensuring that my data going in is valid data going in. That's one area, right? We don't want them to poison it. The other area is, what about when I use my chat bot to access whatever the learning model is doing. So you think about large banks, you think about healthcare, and there's an individual sitting here that makes a natural language query for a financial institution looking for specific information. Is that open to everybody, or should there be guardrails from a network security perspective that says there's only certain individuals or certain systems that have access into this? So again, using vDefend, I could do something like the identity firewall, or I could just use standard policies to determine who's allowed to use this chatbot to make natural language queries against my financial data. Because look, in some cases, attackers get in, they may not be looking to ransom anything, but what if they can find out information that could impact stock price? Right? I mean, that's a great way for them to be able to make money that looks like it's a legal thing to do, but what they're doing is finding insider information. And the more enterprises start bringing data on-prem and putting that into learning models, the more readily available it becomes. So I need to protect the data going in. I need to protect who has access to data. And then the third one is, since these learning models are coming off of the internet in most cases, if there are components of the learning model, how do I control the flows between those things? What if there's a vulnerability that's found, a zero-day attack in a particular component of a learning model 6 months from now? How do I put the guardrails in place to ensure these learning models are accessible via only the ports and protocols that they need to function? And this is where we get to sort of, I would say, micro-segmentation of the learning model components. So input, access, and microseg of the learning model are going to be huge avenues for security when it comes to on-prem private AI.
The AI is like, the attacks on there is just so interesting. The idea that there's something hiding in the training of, like, you have a secret wake word that you can use to activate a rogue process, or some of the agents. I saw someone tweet about this morning, that OpenClaw, the crazy agent everyone's running at their house to run their lives, that the number one downloaded talent plugin for it is actually just a malicious payload. So there's already, people are giving access to this stuff rather rapidly, and it is really cool. Yeah, the Clawbot.
Yeah. I mean, the more we don't understand, the more people are willing to just say, like, well, I kind of just have to trust it, right?
That's that. On the other hand, if you've tried to book a flight, with my booking system, I'll just give it the most sketchiest AI agent that workflow, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to click on all those things and figure out the correct way to book a flight. So this stuff is coming. You can try to say you're not, but people are going to try to take the most mundane elements of their jobs or the most grindy stuff and throw AI at it. And it does provide a lot of value. Yeah. You got to find a pathway.
I don't know if you saw, there was actually an attack that somebody did use Claude, and Claude did 90% of the work to generate the lateral movement across the enterprise.
Well, that's actually what scares me, is once people start using models to automate the lateral movement. Because what I've heard for a long time from ransomware aficionados is that there's a backlog basically of companies that they've got an initial foothold somewhere in the organization. Yeah. But it's running the campaign, doing the lateral movement, getting to the point that you can say, hi, please send me your, crypto to this address. It's the people who manage that is the shortage, and the labor shortage, so to speak. But if the AI can complete that by 98%, we are going to see a significant increase in volume of attacks, and the variety of people who are willing to attack is going to be a lot broader, because, shaking down Pete and I's, home lab might not have been a big deal before, but if AI can automate it, they're going to shake me down for $200 now. Well, go after large companies.
The pool of targets becomes exponentially larger when you automate how you reach into that pool.
Absolutely.
So I did hear that the next version of vDefend is going to include a module for protecting us against Skynet. Can you tell us a little bit about that? No? Hey, you did touch on one thing that I think we might have some time to cover, and you briefly touched on it, but I did want to ask this: identity-based versus IP-based security firewalls, right? It's actually a pretty big deal, and we kind of skim right through it. Can you just spend a little more time on where how far that's come, and where it's most useful?
Yeah. So, well, first off, let's talk about IP, right? So the traditional firewall, you build policy with source destination, IP address, IP network, whatever it is you want to use, doesn't matter. One of the coolest parts about vDefend is that we abstract that away from the end user. We want customers to get out of this idea that I have to micromanage communications by IP addresses. So in our management plane, the ability to create tags and dynamic group memberships, the ability to understand legacy operating systems dynamically because of the VMware tools, right? And we can do all of these things without a single concern for IP address. Now, under the hood, what are we doing? We're translating that into IP because that's how things communicate. But if I can abstract that away from the user, it means that managing firewalls at scale is actually possible. Because managing a firewall across 210,000 workloads, if I'm doing it by IP, is absurd. It's not happening. But if I can do it at a more logical construct level, then absolutely it's feasible. So
and when workloads are increasingly ephemeral and IPs are also ephemeral and they come and go very rapidly,
right.
I mean, that just makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense to rely on IP anymore. And the other thing is too, if you think about it, if you use vDefend and you pretty much dismantle the relationship between IP and security, think about what that does to your enterprise design. If I don't have to rely on IP as a security boundary, I have now opened myself up to make the networking so much easier than it has been historically because that complexity is gone. So it's a really cool feature. All right, so let's talk about identity because this one's a really interesting one. And now, just to explain a little bit about how vDefend does this, for identity firewall, we say identity, but what we're really looking at is Active Directory group membership. We're looking to see if the users has a SID for a particular group. And then what happens is we build a policy where the source is the Active Directory group. Instead of being an IP address or some group of servers or something like that, it's the AD group. So we're able to abstract out the user ID, find that they belong to this group, and then determine yay or nay on whether or not the communication should flow. So great examples of that is VDI, right? You have people logging into VDI. We know who you are, and I want you to be able to get to a specific application or not get to a specific destination. But I just want to do it. I don't care what system you're on. I care that it's you. I care that it's you, Jad. You cannot get to that. I don't care where you sit. Then I want identity firewall.
Yeah.
Okay? Same thing. That's why I use it here in this chatbot, right? I might make this chatbot, but I only want it available to a specific Active Directory group who works in the finance division. That's it. So if the source is the Active Directory group and the destination is the web server hosting this chatbot, I'm going to allow it. Anything else is blocked. I'm done.
And by that point, we've got multi-factor up front. We've got all kinds of identity verification and all that stuff. So
I don't think this is the end all be all, right? Because you still say, well, what if they steal the credentials? Okay, well, that's where I want multi-factor authentication. So there's layers to it. And obviously, the more layers you add, the more secure it gets. The more layers you add, the more manageability it applies. But that's the balance between security and manageability. And that's the balance between security and performance. You have to look at those things.
Man, we are at time for you. I could stay and talk for another 4 hours on this. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking this needs to be a recurring segment on this podcast. This has been super interesting. Real quick though, like closing thoughts for you on sort of like what do people need to take away from understanding what most people may not understand about vDefend? What do you think is the most common misconception, or what should people know?
I think the most common misconception revolves around the learning curve. I think people see, I mentioned the whole portfolio of products that we have, but I think when you look at just maybe vDefend, distributed firewall, if you look at IDS, IPS, the security intelligence, those three tools alone would be so easy for the virtualization engineer to learn. And it's a skill set that is invaluable and will always be invaluable. That I think the most important thing people can learn is it's not difficult. It's something that's easy to do. It's something that's easy to own. And the reason I say that is because back to our go-to-market strategy, we're doing everything we can to make this easy to consume. We're doing everything we can to make it so that I don't have to go out, with all this energy and talk to a customer and then end it by saying, by the way, you need thousands of man hours and 50 new staff to make this happen. That doesn't work. It has to be something that has minimal, if any, impact to the operational model of the organization. I think we've done a great job of making it easy to learn, easy to consume, and very little impact on the operational model.
You know, my favorite quote, I don't even know where it came from, but it is so perfect, especially when I just loved security so much. Well, I still do. Everybody does. It was, security is most interesting when it stops pretending that the world or everything around you is tidy and starts designing for chaos. And I think that's the world we live in, and it's a constant, right?
I think you might have just quoted me back to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Chaos is the state of my lab. So
I love that. I could see that on a t-shirt for sure. Last question for you.
Yeah.
Great light board that you've done. What do you do like when your whole light board is filled up with drawings and we can't see you? Is there a quick way to, do you just like have a way to just like swipe it over? Oh, it's a cleaner.
So you're literally writing on a vertical surface.
I love it. Look at that.
And then it's swapped. So you're not left-handed, are you?
No, I'm right-handed. There's a little magic black box in front of me that inverts the image in real time.
Yeah, gotcha. That's the other thing. People are like, "You're writing backwards, man, with the wrong hand. I don't know what to do with this."
Every meeting I do, somebody says, "Wow, you're really good at writing backwards with your left hand."
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna hit you up for this. I mean, this just makes my iPad screen sharing whiteboards look horribly inefficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chris, thanks so much for joining us on Virtually Speaking. You have an open door invite policy anytime you want to come on. This has been really great.
Oh man, I'd love to come back. I got a bunch of stuff we can talk about.
Absolutely. And for the rest of you, for those listening on the podcast, be sure to go to the YouTube version of this, which can be found on the YouTube / at VMware Cloud Foundation, links below, and also on the show notes of the podcast. Again, Chris, John, Jad, thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.